Morning. Bishop Candia, siblings in Christ of the Central State Synod, peace be with you today as we celebrate what it means to be church together. I would like to begin by bringing you greetings from your churchwide organization and from our presiding Bishop Elizabeth Eaton, who you will hear from in video form at the end of my report. Again, my name is Nick Kiger and I serve as the Director for Mission Support. Being present with you all at your assembly will mark the first time I have traveled to be in person with the Synod since March of 2020. So as someone who had up to that point traveled pretty frequently to visit with synods, I feel really blessed to be back amongst the people of this church and to return to the Central State Synod, where I last visited way back in 2018. I was so warmly welcomed then and feel that same welcome from you now. I look forward to extending that same welcome to those of you who will be attending the Churchwide Assembly in August when you visit my hometown of Columbus, Ohio. So any of you who are coming to Columbus, please come and find me. I can give you some good recommendations. I believe one of the things that connects us together are the stories we tell. Whether we are telling our own story or the stories of the ministries of our congregations or our synod, by the telling of stories, we are inviting others to be a piece of who we are and the ministry that is important to us. As we share in this time together, I encourage you to think about your own story and how you might use that story to invite others into the ministries that are so important to you. When my brother and I were younger, our parents would take us on an annual trip to Ormond Beach, Florida. My father, being very frugal, always insisted on driving from Ohio to Florida. This drive always included very few stops and the inevitable dilemma of being ready to stop, but finding no vacancies, or at least none that Dad was willing to pay for. As you might imagine, this time in the car only fueled the fire of the sibling rivalry between me and my brother. We spent hours arguing, ignoring our mother's pleas for peace. And I remember one year, an exceptionally bad drive. We were stopped in traffic somewhere in Georgia, and my brother and I were doing verbal battle. Suddenly, the door to our Chevy Suburban opened, and there stood our mom. She pulled us out right on the shoulder of the road. She rarely ever raised her voice, but on this day, I'm sure she could be heard across the state line in Florida. She looked at us both, frustration in her gaze, and said, "You know, if you two could just get along, this trip would be way more fun." And that's the PG version, by the way. Anyway, being that I could count on one hand the number of times I ever heard my mom raise her voice to us, this moment definitely made an impact on my brother and me. We were perfect angels for the rest of the trip. At least that's how I remember it. We even started talking between ourselves about the things we could do to get along better. We decided that we needed to prove ourselves to our mom by teaming up on a project. When we got to the hotel, we set our plan into motion. We collected the necessary supplies, 2 shovels, 1 large bucket filled halfway with water. It wasn't long until we were headed down the stairs from the hotel pool to the beach. We were on a rescue mission. Having been there in years past, we knew exactly what we were looking for. We scanned the beach until we found our first friend in need of rescue. Bucket in hand, I held it out while my brother scooped our patient safely into the bucket. We worked tirelessly for a few more minutes to collect about 20 or so of his friends, filling the bucket before making our way back up the stairs to the pool where our parents sat, trying to relax after a long drive. The final stage of our mission had to be performed in front of our mom so she could see just how well we were working together. It was immediately clear that we might have made a slight miscalculation in how our mom would react as we dumped 20 half-dead jellyfish into the hotel pool. While I'm sure our mom was a little embarrassed and maybe even a little upset as the pool was evacuated and closed, while hotel staff completely unraveled our rescue mission, I hope she saw that we were sincerely trying to work together, to make the trip more fun. And I have to admit that wasn't the first time I had evacuated that pool in my life, and I'm happy to share the other story with you when I'm not up here. Now, what does that story have to do with me addressing this assembly as your churchwide representative? I'm afraid you're going to have to wait a few more minutes for that answer while I share what we were able to do together in partnership with the Central States Synod. First, I want to thank you for your generosity through the sharing of mission support. The congregations of the Central States Synod made it possible for the Synod to share $776,903 in mission support with the churchwide organization in 2021. This mission support made ministry possible across the whole church, to grow and strengthen the ELCA ministries across the country, to accompany companions around the world, and to train and equip current and future leaders in this church. Last year, even in the midst of an ongoing pandemic and the uncertainty that brought with it, financial giving remained strong across the church. In my work with mission support, I was able to see how individuals and congregations, whether having a large abundance or maybe a little less, continued to share generously, supporting local, synod, and churchwide ministries. The generosity of the Central States Synod reached well beyond synod borders in 2021. Through relationships with companion churches in Papua New Guinea and Russia, you made it possible for the ELCA to continue to accompany partners there. Through missionary sponsorship, and the Synod made even more ministry possible in Russia. And through your support of young adults in global mission, you will have an even greater impact in ministry in Central Europe. The people of the Central States Synod joined ELCA Lutherans across the country to support the work of Lutheran Disaster Response and ELCA World Hunger. Gifts from within the Synod to LDR and World Hunger totaled $762,188. Across the ELCA, nearly $23 million was shared to support the work of ELCA World Hunger, and $14.5 million shared to support the work of LDR. The people of the Central States Synod have also joined other ELCA Lutherans in sharing over $8.9 million to date for the Eastern Europe crisis response, with every penny of that going into program response to the situation in and around Ukraine. Thanks be to God for this generosity and the ministry that we make possible together. This Synod has also been the steward of several domestic hunger grants to address food insecurity, health, housing, and education, and several congregational vitality grants to do new and vital ministry around the Synod. Synod has also made an investment in current and future leaders of this church by nurturing and supporting the ministry of your ELCA Fund for Leaders Scholarship recipients, Eric Jensen and Lisa Simmelink. Your Synod has given the whole church the gift of leaders from your Synod who serve the church in various ways, including Donna Simon and Amy Appel, who serve as your directors for evangelical mission, and bless and support their colleague DEMs across the church. You have also given us the gift of Susan Boxberger, who serves on the ELCA Church Council, Kevin Boatwright, who serves on the Committee on Discipline, and Joan Saltzman, who serves on the 2022 Churchwide Assembly Memorials Committee. And we are so wonderfully blessed by the leadership of your bishop, who walks alongside the whole church in her work with the ELCA Conference of Bishops. This church is made better and stronger because of the gifts of these leaders. The best part of my job is being able to see and hear the stories of the ministries that you all make possible, especially through sharing thanks on behalf of those for the mission support that makes those ministries possible. A few years ago, I worshiped in a recently closed congregation right here in Kansas City that through their closing was able to breathe life into a new worshiping community called Gathering Table. Gathering Table is a community of mostly unhoused, unemployed, and underemployed people. The mission developer at that congregation, your own Pastor Ann, works tirelessly on behalf of the people in her congregation to make sure that their basic needs are met, as well as their spiritual needs, including weekly Holy Communion. The members of this worshiping community know that they will never be able to sustain their ministry alone. and sometimes feel the pressure of keeping their ministry going. As we were eating lunch after the service, one of the members asked me with a worried look, "How much longer will this congregation be here?" I have to admit that I was not prepared for that question. Luckily, Pastor Ann was right beside me and answered, "Hopefully we will be here as long as God is calling us to be here, and as long as our siblings in Christ are willing to support us." I wish I could have captured the look of relief on that member's face, as that look said thank you in a way no words ever could. You make Pastor Ann's ministry possible, and on behalf of Pastor Ann, thank you. One of my last visits to a synod before the pandemic, I was with the people of the Northern Texas, Northern Louisiana Synod. At one point during my visit, I found myself driving down a long dirt road in Alvarado, Texas, to visit one of the leaders of San Gabriel Lutheran Church. I met with Pastor Jesus Escamilla, who started attending Bible studies in 2006 with a group of mostly Mexican immigrants who would eventually make up the congregation of San Gabriel. He was there when they met in homes of fellow worshipers, and as the community grew to need their own leader, which Jesus took on, as they grew to need their own worship space in Alvarado. He was there when they worshiped in a makeshift worship space on a piece of rented land, and recalled in a recent story that you can find in Stories of Faith in Action, that everyone was dusty, but they didn't care because they had a place to worship, their own place. Through the generosity of others, including mission support shared with the Churchwide organization from other synods, San Gabriel was able to build this makeshift space into a permanent church, continuing to grow and adding a large fellowship hall that serves the area's largely Mexican immigrant population. I felt the joy and pride that Pastor Jesus had for his congregation and the hard work the members of the congregation put into building a place that they could call home. I also felt the gratitude he had for the generosity of others that helped San Gabriel become the vibrant worshiping community that they are today. On behalf of Pastor Jesus, thank you. Last year, I was one of the many people to hear and see the story of Mark and Linda Jacobson as they told their story of their 38 years of service as ELCA missionaries accompanying the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania. Rafael Malpica Padilla, ELCA Executive Director for Service and Justice, described Mark and Linda as the embodiment of a faith servant of Christ, and that their whole life has been a life of accompaniment. In the beginning of their service, Mark, who is a doctor, supported the Maasai community health workers in 6 small primary care clinics. He quickly realized that prevention could only prevent a certain amount of disease. People still needed a place to go when acutely ill. So with the accompaniment of the church in Tanzania, he developed one of the clinics into the Salian Lutheran Hospital, which now provides care in orthopedics, fistula, hospice, and other areas. Later, he developed the Arusha Lutheran Medical Center, creating training programs for medical officers and nurses. Linda's focus was on coordinating volunteers, offering hospitality, and arranging housing for visiting medical students and interns. But the most impactful part of her ministry may have been the support group Widow's Might, which was launched to counter the practice in Tanzania of disinheriting widows. Over the many years of their service, they were supported by the generosity of others, including mission support shared with the Churchwide organization. On behalf of Mark and Linda Jacobson, thank you. Through mission support, our ministry extends beyond our congregations and our synods. Even though Ann, Jesus, Mark, and Linda service communities just a few, hundreds, or even thousands of miles away, they are doing ministry on your behalf. Because you share mission support, you can tell friends and family that your church has ministry on the margins in Kansas City, among the Mexican immigrant population of Alvarado, and in accompanying people in Tanzania. Your church has ministry on Native American reservations, in big cities, in small towns, in places on the other side of the ocean. The best part is that it goes both ways. When you do ministry in your local congregation, you are doing that on behalf of all of us. When you embrace people with the grace of God through your ministry, you are doing that on our behalf. For the ministry that you make possible through your financial gifts, thank you. For the leaders you raise up to enrich our church, thank you. And for the ministry you do each and every day on behalf of me and every other member of this church, thank you. Now, I'm sure even while hearing all of those inspiring stories, all you could think about was jellyfish in the hotel swimming pool. I want you to think back to that story for just a moment. Doesn't that story of an argument turned into a rescue mission look a little bit like ministry? My brother and I were reminded by our mom that even when we disagreed, we had the opportunity to make good and lasting memories in our life together. On that car ride, we had allowed our disagreements to consume us to the point that we couldn't even see the fun that awaited us at our destination. How many times in the church do we allow our disagreements to cause us to lose sight of the amazing, life-changing ministry that we can do together? I think back to a challenge Bishop Eaton gave us when I first started working at the Churchwide organization, to be church together for the sake of the world. Being church together doesn't always mean that we will agree. It doesn't mean that we excuse injustice or that we don't use our voice when we must be critical of our structures and institutions. What it does mean is that even in the midst of those things, we love one another and we work together to share Christ's love for the sake of the world. When we are engaged in ministry together, we can accomplish amazing things. Sometimes it gets messy or uncomfortable and we end up dumping jellyfish into a swimming pool. But sometimes we scoop up those jellyfish just before they are about to take their final breath, and we breathe new life into them through the grace of God. Don't be afraid to gather your buckets and shovels and go out into a world that expects us to focus on what separates us. Don't forget to invite your siblings in Christ along. Because even in our differences, even when we are separated by miles, we do ministry together. We make God's love for all God's creation visible. This is the story I have to share. I hope you will be part of my story, of our church's story, of one another's story. And I hope you will walk alongside me and one another as we continue to write that story together. Thank you, and may God bless you.